Okay, so this is picking up from the examples we created the first couple weeks in class, where we wrote our own class itself, a description of a bubble, and used that in our main program here. So if I run play, we just get a full screen example of this. We're just creating 250 some odd ellipses and randomly assigning where they are, how they move, what color they are, what size, that kind of stuff. But what if we wanted to use some existing data to drive some of this, as if we were doing a data visualization? So the next couple of tutorials, we have one long tutorial broken into several parts on YouTube, will show us how to do that. So let's get started. All right, so I have my main sketch open here, and I have my Finder window open. So the first thing we need to do if we're going to use some data is add it to the processing sketch folder. So here's my, this is a CSV file. So comma separated values. It's just how it's saved, but it displays as if it was in little cells in Numbers or in Excel. And it has a little header on that called the numbers. And for now, I'll just say that they're a set of numbers. They actually are from a data set, but I don't want to talk about where those numbers came from just quite yet. So let's take this, and there's several ways we can do this, but the easiest to add it to our project, our sketch folder, is to drag and drop it. And if you look over here, you'll see as I let this go, I get now a new data folder, and a new copy of that file has been placed in here, right? So you can access data from anywhere, but the easiest place, the home directory, if you want to think of it that way, the processing looks to is in the data folder. So it automatically creates that folder for us, and we put our files in there. Okay, so how are we going to load this data? And as you can imagine, there's lots of different ways we can do this. We have our main program with setup and draw. We've written a class. So I want to show how to write your own little function. This is something that's going to be a grouping of code. Just give myself a little bit of room. A grouping of code that we could place anywhere, and we're going to put it in this case in the setup because we just want to load the code once at the beginning of our program, and then we're going to use it in different places. So void, and we're going to name this load data. It could be anything. So I have that there, and the first thing I need to do is create some objects for this data to go to. So in processing, if I go to the reference here, under the data types we have primitive, we're using float and integers. We also have some composite objects, and one of those is table. We're going to use table and table row. So this is just for the data that we're using. We could also use XML data, JSON data, okay, lots of options. So click on table. It has a few examples of how this works. So let's right off the bat, let's just say table. So that's the type of data we're going to use, and I'm just going to name this table. And I'm also going to say table row, and I'm just going to name that row. I'm also, at the very beginning here, I'm going to take that function, load data, and put it in the setup. So in the order of operations, as we run down through the program at the beginning, it creates some global variables. We run into the setup. It creates a canvas. In fact, for our tutorial purposes here at the beginning, let's go ahead and just use size. So if I run that, so I'm not continually going to full screen, you can see I get a window playing this. I don't get any errors, so everything's fine. The load data, what would happen is, as it runs along setup, it gets to load data. This little function then searches the rest of the program to see what those instructions are for this load data function. And right now, all we've said is, let's create a table and a row, but we haven't done anything with it. Right. So the next part is we want to say table equals load table. And then let's try to use our reference as we go along here. If I scroll down to the bottom, related methods here for this are the load table which shows that it wants the file name and then the options go with it. So the file name is a string or the name of where that, the name of the file that we're going to use, or its URL or whatever it would be. In this case, we just need to give it the my data underscore example.csv. Okay, and then I'll put comma, and if you look at it here, it has an example right above it here. So this would be the name of their imaginary load data file, and then we can add some options to it. So we can say header. We could also put header, comma, TSV or CSV to tell processing what kind of data file it is and how it's organized, but this will work fine. The header option is just so it tells processing, hey, we're going to declare and access this stuff by typing in the name of the header associated with the column. Right, so let's go ahead and press play. So I'm going to continue to do this over and over just to make sure everything's running, especially since it's been kind of a long day. See if I make any mistakes as we go along. So now I have row. So the first thing is I want to go grab the table, which is the whole entire spreadsheet. And then within that spreadsheet, what I'm going to do is grab a row of it. Now in this case we only have one, but in most examples you would probably have a spreadsheet that would have multiple columns, right? So you can have a name of faculty member or the latitude and longitude of a location. It could be lots of things, right? So row equals table. So the first thing I want to do is figure out, well, there's several things I can do with this, but let's do get what is it? Table get row. Okay. So right now what I've done is I've grabbed the first row of that data. So if I press play, hopefully I don't get any errors. Okay. So this doesn't give me any information that I'm going to print out yet. I'd have to do one more thing. So let's see, float test number equals, let's get the row and get a float. And you can see I've got my little help on here, so it's giving me suggestions about what I want. So it's saying you can get the float from an integer, which in this case would be the index of which column I'm using, or by the name. So I'm going to say string, and inside of here I'll say the numbers. See if I get any errors. Right, so I don't, everything's fine. And the last thing I'm going to do, and I'm doing this as increments so I can just make sure everything's working. So instead of setting this all up so I get all the pieces of data, I just want to make sure it's reading the first row with that one column. So I'm going to print the test number. Okay, and if you're not familiar with this yet, we're using print line to just say down here in the bottom in the console, print whatever this number is. So let's go ahead and run that. All right, 635,000, just to make sure, so we can get a sense of how this is doing what it's doing. If I look at this, there you see the very first number is 635,000. So that's we've loaded the table, which is that file, and then the row has gone into that table and grabbed the first row. And it's not this one because I told it, hey, I'm using a header, so don't just ignore that. Consider the first one here, that header, as a string. And when I go and grab the information from this row, and again, I only have one bit of data in here, but again, you would often have lots more than that. And I can say, give me the float, because I know that it's a number. So give me the floating point number from this header column called the numbers, right? All right. So, okay, so this is totally working for us right now. We'll recap again. We have the table gets turned into a row, and then from that row we can grab a number. Okay, so let's write this down. So get let's get down here. Just thinking how to describe this. Load the table is probably a better way, and then load a row from that table, and then get a number from that row. Okay. Okay, so this is a good start. How are we doing on time here? But this only gives us that one number. We need all of the numbers that are in there. And because it's going to be a list, we're going to use an array. Now, above, we created a list of bubbles, okay? And we decided it was going to be 200. So we have to tell processing how long that array is going to be. And I could go into the spreadsheet and look and see where it is in there and subtract 1 or whatever. But there's a better way, especially when you have lots of data in here, to find out how long that this list is in the header. So we're going to use table. We're going to use integer new total. So we want to know what this new total is, and we'll say from that table get row count. All right, so now how do I know how to do that, right? Why would I, how would you know to do that? So in the table object, right? So here's all its methods that we can use down here. So we can add columns, we can get a row from the table, we can get the row count. Okay, so that will, it even tells us here, right, there it is, get the number of rows in the table. And let's go ahead and print that out instead. New total. All right, so 3,597. All right, so that's a decent number here. So we want to use that everywhere. We want to create 3,597 circles because we're going to take each one of those numbers and make sure they correspond to each one of the circles in there. So we need to use that in the rest of our program. So what I'm going to do is just delete total here, and we're going to say this is going to be our total. So it's already been declared, so I'm just going to say create this variable called total, and when you get to load data, this is where you're going to get that number, and then we're going to use it places. So I'll run that. And we get an error where it says the index array is out of bounds. Okay, so let's hit stop right there. The problem is we haven't told processing right off the bat. We declared it up here what the bubble was going to be, but total is just 0. Okay, so we've said we're going to have 0 bubbles, and then we tried to create 3,597 of those. So what I need to do is just a little reorganizing. And let's just put that. Oops. So once we know what the total is, we can say b equals new bubble, and we can put the total there. Right, so we declared this in the previous exercises. We declared it up here, which is a fine place to do it if I know what that total is, but I don't really know what that total is until load data runs and it's been reassigned. Say, hey, total equals whatever the row count is. So now that it knows that, it can make that the correct size, and we're going to pass total on in each one of these and create, in this case, probably way too many bubbles. We'll see what happens in our screen. All right, so you can see they're all filling in. The other thing is that in the previous example, we wanted to make some art that just continually drew to the screen. In this case, I just want to draw them and fill it in with background, right? So we have an animation running. We have these ellipses in here, and we know what the total is, but we're not really doing anything with the data yet. So that's going to be part 2. So go ahead and save this, and I'll see you at part 2 of this video.